first question. How much will the loss of Maurice Harkless impact the Blazers? And if you're just tuning in or didn't know about Mo Harkless, knee surgery, he's expected to have a reevaluation in about 2 weeks, which would be the final day of the regular season for the Blazers. And you never know with these things. He could be out a long time. It could be 2 weeks. Who knows? But that's the question. How much of an impact does it have on the Blazers?
I mean, that's the real question since the last time we talked about this Blazers team. You know, we can argue the results of what's happened in the 4 games they played then. But the one thing everyone's kind of wondering is, you know, now that the Damian Lillard's had his kid, is Maurice Harkless. You know, what type of impact is having him out going to be? And we don't know how long he's going to be out, so we can't really even speculate on that. We know he's out for the rest of the regular season. So in that context, I think the Blazers will still be able to secure the 3rd seed just fine, despite Maurice Harkless being out. They played well against the Pelicans without him, and really they only have to play 500 ball with that the rest of the year to lock up the 3 seed, because they're basically 3 games
they're
up
in a good spot
on the Thunder right now with 7 to go. But if this is something that lingers into the postseason, I have real serious concerns for the Blazers, because no matter who they play, even though it's most likely going to be a 6 seed, it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to be an absolute battle. It's going to go to 6 or 7 games. And there are a lot of things Maurice Harkless does for this team that in a 6 or 7 game series can be really pivotal. You know, it could be the difference between losing a game 5 when you're tied 2-2 and being down 3-2 or being up 3-2. You know, he's been a great 3-point shooter since his return to the lineup. Defensively, he's been one of their best players throughout his career with the Blazers. And so those 2 things, they're going to need other guys to step up to fill those voids, but they weren't necessarily getting those contributions before Maurice Harkless came in and started doing this. It was one of the reasons they kind of muddled around 500. So my fear is, without him, they might kind of return a little bit to that team that just hung around 500 for so long.
Jared, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the regular season, it's not as big a concern. They've built themselves a nice cushion for the 3. But if they get into the playoffs, I don't think it's going to impact the starting lineup so much, because I think Maurice Harkless is better than Evan Turner, but I think you plug Evan Turner in at small forward, that's still going to work, because that starting lineup with Evan Turner at small forward is still one of their best 5-man lineups this season. They outscore teams by about 8 points per 100 possessions, so that will be fine. But the problem with that is then you're taking Evan Turner out of, off the bench. He's not part of that bench unit anymore, so that weakens the bench. And you need guys like Shabazz Napier and Pat Connaughton to step up. And frankly, they're playing good basketball outside of shooting the ball, which is a really important part of basketball. And they're shooting, they're in both in extended shooting slumps. If you look at the past 21 games, Shabazz is shooting 35% from the field and 33% from the three-point line. 27 games, Connaughton's shooting 33% from the field and 28% from the three-point line, and that's not going to get it done. They've got to be better. And if they're not going to be better, then Maurice Harkless being out of the lineup could absolutely hurt the Blazers.
It's such a shame that this is happening to him. After all that he's been through this season, he's worked his way back in. It was such a great story. We talked about it at length last week, just what he's had to overcome to get back to this point. Joe Freeman had this great story where he kind of revealed that he had to apologize to the team about him just kind of being salty about the way that things are going. He's come into his own. He's playing some of his best basketball that he's as a Blazer, as you mentioned. And so I think that's the part that stings the most in all this, is you're rooting for a guy like him, and he's in the right spot. And in turn, he's played his best basketball when the team has played its best basketball. So when they were riding that 13-game winning streak, it was easy to look at him and see his numbers and see what he was doing. And you mentioned what he brings. He's averaging 12 points a game in his last 8 games. But defensively, I mean, it's just part of the team's identity as a top 5 defense they've been flirting with most of the year. To lose a guy like this, right now, it doesn't really matter. They're going to get into the playoffs, and they've put themselves into a solid position where they're probably going to get this 3 seed unless there's just this gigantic collapse. And so we're talking postseason, and we've seen how the West is. I mean, it's one game is separating a lot of those teams right now. So, right now I think it's the Spurs who they would face.
The Spurs are the 6.
But it could be the Pelicans. It could be OKC.
Could be the Jazz.
And it's going to be a grind. They're going to get into some tight games, and having a guy like Maurice Harkless out there, I think is great. And so the flow is going to be tough. I mean, to get back.
He does a lot of little things. Like the Phoenix comeback, we all remember because Damian Lillard went bananas in the fourth quarter. But one of the things we forget is what set up Damian for that game-winning layup was Maurice Harkless hounding the inbounder, and they had a 5-second inbound penalty, did the Suns, and then the Blazers got the ball and ended up going and winning the game. It's little things like that that he brings to this team that's going to be a big deal. And Jared brought up Shabazz and Pat. He's 100% right. You can extend that out to 30 games even for both of those guys, and their shooting percentages are similar to what he said. And Jared's right. They need other players to step up. Earlier in the year, it was Shabazz. You know, he was the guy who stepped up to fill the offensive void. He needs to get that shooting stroke going, and Pat Connaughton's going to see more minutes. He needs to get it going as well.